Hi, today I'm going to show you some of the features of the Professional Service Tools Library for Microsoft Dynamics GP. And today I'm using GP 2010 and 2010 Release 2. If you do not own the Professional Service Tools Library, you really need to talk to your partner about getting them because there are so many amazing things that can make your life so much easier by just utilizing the tools. It is a separate install. It installs on top of your GP, so you want to keep that in mind. So today's scenario, we're going to play with some of the receivables tools. And we're going to do the scenario where one of my customers, Manchester Suites, has notified me that they purchased another hotel, Plaza One Hotel, and that also happens to be one of my customers. So what I want to do is combine the records so that I have all the records under one customer file. Let's go to sales first and take a look at what's going on. So under inquiry in my sales series, I'm going to choose transaction by customer, and I'm in the Fabricam database today. And I will pull up Manchester Suites, and you can see there are quite a few transactions out there for Manchester Suites. It looks like there's 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 different transactions out there. And I'm going to pull up Plaza One, and you can see there are many more transactions than 13. There are quite a few transactions. So what I'm going to do is just close that out. And what we're going to do is merge all of the transaction from Plaza One into Manchester Suites. So I'll go back to my home page, and on my navigation page I have the Professional Service Tools Library. That's where I put the application. I'll click on it and it'll open the window for me. Now this is all divided by series, so I'm going to choose the sales series, and I'm going to choose the first option called Customer Combiner. And you'll notice that next to each of the tools there is a checkbox, and the checkbox indicates which ones I have registration numbers installed for. So I'm going to do Customer Combiner, and I'll click on Next. A very simple window will pop up asking me which customer I want to combine into which customer. So I want to combine Plaza One into Manchester Suites. And if I have a whole list of customers I want to combine, I can just import the list, validate it, and import and do it all at one time instead of manually doing this one to this one, this one to this one, this one to this one, and so on. So I'll now click on Convert, and I get the warning message that I need to make sure I back up before I do this. And this is true of everything in the tools library. And anytime you're working in Microsoft Dynamics GP and you're using the tools library, you're doing something in routines or something under utilities, you should do a backup first. I'll click Continue, and the process is finished. So it's combined these two records. When I close out of the Customer Combiner window, I will get an audit report that shows me what I did. So basically I took under the combined customer numbers, I started with Plaza One and I moved all that data to Manchester Suites. Let's close out the professional tools, go back to sales. Let's go through. Let's start by looking at Plaza One again, and you'll notice that customer now doesn't even exist. Now let's stretch that out and open up Manchester Suites. And now you'll notice Manchester Suites has all of those transactions that it had before plus all the transactions for Plaza One. So it has a slew of transactions, and if I were to drill down on any of these, you can see they've now taken on the name Manchester Suites as well. So let's close that out. The second thing I want to do is, I've also been informed by Manchester Suites that they are changing their name from Manchester Suites to Manchester Plaza Suites. They're just combining the two names together. So back to my professional tools, open that up, and I'm going to choose the Customer Name Modifier and click on Next, and I'll pull up Manchester Suites, and I will now call it Manchester Plaza Suites. And again, I could do a list at one time, or I could do one at a time by clicking on Convert. I get the reminder to back up, and when I close out the Customer Name Modifier window, I get my audit report that shows me customer number now has a new name, Manchester Plaza Suites. So again, I'm just going to modify the professional tools this time. Again, if I go back into Transaction by Customer for Sales and I look at Manchester Suites, if I were to drill down on any of these transactions, it's going to say Manchester Plaza Suites on the invoice. So if I were to reprint them, it'll have the new name. Now, if I've also been notified by them that maybe they want a new customer ID, or perhaps I want to give them a new customer ID so I can keep track of that, again, I'll just use my Professional Tools library and I'll choose Customer Modifier. I'll click on Next. I'll pull up Manchester Suites, and then I'll give it my new customer ID. So maybe I'm going to call it Man Plaza, and we'll convert that. I get my message to back up, and I'll click OK. Let's close this out, print the screen, and now you'll see I have my starting customer ID and now my ending customer ID. So once again, if I do a transaction by customer, if I go to Manchester, that customer is not going to exist. But I now have Man Plaza for my Manchester Plaza. Now, let's unmark work in history and redisplay. And you'll see this particular invoice. It's invoice that ends in 2007 for $299.90. If now that after all this has occurred, I want to unapply the payment that was applied to this invoice, I could see the payment by just clicking on the Apply Amount Remaining option from this Receivables Transaction Inquiry Customer window, and I can see the payment. Maybe that payment was intended for another customer altogether, and I just guessed at it. So I want to unapply it. Now, I have a problem, don't I? It's in history. So in GP itself, you can't do that. But using the tools library for Microsoft Dynamics GP, I can. So I'm going to click OK here, pull my tools library back up, and I have an option called RM for Receivables Management, Transaction Unapply. I'll click on Next. I'll put in my customer ID. Remember, it's Man Plaza now. And I can see my work open in history buttons. I'm going to just show the history buttons. There's my invoice that ends in 2007 for $299.90. I want to unapply it, and when I unclick the button for applied, I can either just print a report and see what would happen as a result, or I can unapply it. I'm going to choose to unapply it, and I get this audit window, and it's warning me that the following records were unapplied because I actually did move transactions from the history file back to the open file. So this invoice and this payment have now been unapplied and moved back to open. So let's go and take a look at that customer record. So if I go to Transaction by Customer and look up Man Plaza, let's unmark Open in History, and notice I cannot see my 2007 invoice. So if I go back and just look at Open, there it is, 2007 for $299.90. I click on the applied, then I can see that that's been completely unapplied, and I'd have to go through the apply process and deal with it. At this point, I could also void the check if I wanted to and then re-enter it in somewhere else. These are some amazing things that the Professional Service Tools Library can do. I hope there's something that could benefit you.